You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Would you like to open us with a prayer?
So, Heavenly King, Consoler, the Spirit of Truth, present in all places, filling all things, the treasury of blessings and the giver of life, come and dwell in us and cleanse us of all stain, so we'll say all sin, and lead us into the light. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.
Amen. So what exactly was it that led you to decide to write about this?
A number of things. I was interested in trying to promote an understanding of how to pray with imagery and what the core imagery would be of not just the domestic church. I focused on the domestic church because that is something that we have control over. Fortunately, not many of us have control over what actually appears in the main church, in the parish church. I thought the more people that were aware of this, the more it might have an impact. But I wanted to give some principles for creating a home altar based upon the images, teaching people to pray, and especially encouraging through the domestic church the praying of the liturgy of the hours. So there would be a habit of praying liturgically with visual imagery. So that was the main goal. Why am I interested in that? Well, my grand mission, if you like, is the transformation of the culture and the evangelization of the culture, as you might say. So I'd like to see a culture of beauty, a wider contemporary culture that reflects Christian values and the values of the West. And so as part of that, my belief is really, which has come to me through reading writers such as Benedict XVI, that the domestic church and what happens in families actually forms the Catholic culture and the culture of faith most powerfully, and then from there it works its way into the church and then out into the wider society in many ways. And so one of the things that I feel is lacking in the church and in the home, actually, is an engagement with the visual in the course of the liturgy. So we're in a situation now where, if we believe Benedict XVI in his book, The Spirit of the Liturgy, the contemporary culture became detached from the culture of faith, and that connection is needed in order to maintain a beautiful Christian contemporary culture. They became detached, he says, as early as the beginning of the 19th century. So this is a problem that way predates Vatican II or anything like that. The culture of ugliness has its roots at that point. And so the goal is to reconnect them. So a number of things are needed. One is liturgical reform, and the Second Vatican Council addressed that, and then the implementation was woeful, as we know, largely. And so that's the situation in the church, very much. But what can I do about it? I'm a lay person. I can't get wagging my fingers at priests and bishops. Although it's great fun, it doesn't actually achieve very much.
Right.
And so very often it's unfair in that people have their hands tied, particularly the priests. I feel that they're not formed well. Even if they have an idea of what to do, they don't get the support of their bishops. So I just don't want to be another troublesome parishioner. So how can we deal with this? We can develop, as lay people, the habit of praying liturgically and engaging with visual imagery in the home. So I felt that if I encourage the liturgy of the hours and the connecting with visual imagery, and I explain, first of all, how to set up the icon corner and how to engage with it in prayer, then those habits would work their way into the church. Some people will be surprised, I think, at what I say, or they would assume that it's better than it is. So, but my experience is that I barely know of any Roman Catholic church where there is an authentic engagement with the visual imagery in terms of the liturgy. I've been to Orthodox divine liturgies and Byzantine Catholic divine liturgies. And what happens there is that every time, for example, the Mother of God is addressed in prayer, the deacon will come out, incense the image, and everybody sings the prayer, praying to Mary through her image. And that's in the course of the liturgy. I've never seen anything done like that, even in the most pious traditional Latin Mass. They may have a beautiful church, but really what it amounts to very often, certainly the ones I've seen, is a beautiful backdrop that there isn't this liturgical engagement. And my feeling is that there needs to be more of that. And so I'm trying to develop the habit in people of, for example, every time the Son is addressed, look to, or the Father is addressed. The liturgy is the worship of the Father through the Son, with the Spirit. That's what liturgy is. That's what our worship is. How can we look at an image? Well, the Son is the image of the Father. So you address the Father through the Son. And so every time we pray, "O Father," look to the Son, get used to the S-O-N, and get used to engaging. And my belief is that if we have a sort of liturgical habits that engage with the music and the art and the architecture as appropriate, the more those are in harmony, the more we will have this connection between the culture of faith and the wider contemporary culture. In other words, what's happening is that the wider culture will be driven by the culture of faith rather than the situation we have now, which is they're two separate things. The wider culture is a contemporary secular culture where there is a culture of faith. It's separated from it. And we need to be back in the driving seat. And as lay people, I'm thinking, what can we do? We can't change very much that goes on in the church. Let's assume I have to hold my nose on Sundays and go to a liturgy which I'm not happy with. It's licit, but it's not the most beautiful I would like. That is the only option I might have. But I can have a fulfilling liturgical life as a whole if I prepare for it well. And part of that is praying with the liturgy of the hours in the home. So that was part of it. The other thing is to try and encourage family prayer, especially with fathers leading the family in prayer and singing again, which just doesn't happen. Now, we don't have instructions on singing here, but it's certainly encouraged. And the one story that led me to think that this was possible was that I was staying actually with an Orthodox family, and they prayed night prayer, Compline, together, and Dad led the prayers. And what happened was they did the whole thing just recto tono. So they just sang it on one note, just like that. And they went through the psalms and the chants. And what they did was they took it in turns to do stanzas of the psalm. So this was Dad and probably three or four children, I forget. But from probably age 12 to about age 6, and all of them were singing. And they took their turn. And what happened at a certain point was that two of the children started fighting, started arguing with each other because they were arguing about whose turn it was to sing the psalm. And Dad
Oh,
had to step in. So, well, no, it's your turn. And then don't worry, you'll get your turn. You go next. And I
yeah,
remember thinking, this is a pretty good situation to be in. The arguments are about whose turn is it to sing the psalms.
yeah, yeah.
So um, that's the sort of broad answer. It is to generate a liturgical sensibility that includes singing or chanting, visual imagery, consideration of posture. So to
Hmm.
bow at the name of the Trinity, and therefore engaging the whole person. And that will aid, therefore, our supernatural transformation in
Hmm.
Christ, which occurs with the encounter with the Eucharist. If we're prepared for that, even in a Mass that is not to my liking, if I can put it like that, then it's available to me, I think. That I'm not denied this great gift of the Church.
Right. Hmm. Yeah, that's an ambitious goal.
Well, it is. You don't aim high, even if I get 2/3 of the way, I might get,
Oh,
it's pretty good. Yeah.
yeah, agree. I agree. Hmm. So, yeah. So, I was very impressed with this because I did not know hardly any of this things about a little oratory and, how you'd set it up. And you did such a beautiful job really explain. I mean, really, you went into such great detail. You can have a long table, you can have a hutch, and it was like I was thinking, this is great, because people wouldn't think. I mean, it's like, well, if it's going to be an altar, we think of a table. You'd never think of a shelf or something that was just like a curio cabinet, I guess. But it was just reading through this, and I thought, wow, this is really great because it'll give people a lot of ideas, and
Yes. Well, I should point out that this was jointly written with Leila Lawler,
yeah.
who had has a very, very popular blog, I think, or she certainly did, called like Mother, like Daughter, I think it's called.
Hmm.
Um, but she has a lot of those sort of details. I'm interested in the theology and the wider picture.
Yeah.
Some of the doing and the praying, which I'm used to, I would get into quite sort of complex detail in that. But a lot of the practicalities in the
Hmm.
home came from her. She had a beautiful touch with that, I think, and a sort of
Yeah.
a real sense of what the objections might be, what difficulties people might have. Uh,
Right. Right.
so a lot of that is credit to her, I would say. But it worked very well. We sat down together,
Hmm.
and actually the um, Sophia Institute Press, who published
Hmm.
it, I pitched this idea
Hmm.
to Charlie McKinney, who heads Sophia Institute Press, and he said, you can do this, but I want you to team up with Lila Lawler." I think he thought, for one thing, Lila has a huge following, so it would help sell the
Hmm.
book. But she
Hmm.
has this way of connecting with families that would
Hmm.
help, was appropriate to the subject matter, I would say
Hmm.
as well. So it
Right.
was a great idea, actually. So we sat down together, Lila and I, and I think we wrote alternating chapters. We worked out what we were going to do, and we took um, chapters each.
Hmm.
And then the other thing that, of course, I had to do was I produced the art so at the
Hmm.
back of the book, there are
Oh, yeah.
color plates, about a dozen color plates of iconographic art, which I painted, and
Hmm.
those are detachable. And they had to be a particular size. Um,
Hmm.
and Charlie told me that when the first book came off the press, he took
Hmm.
it down to Walmart and bought the cheap $5 frames, so the lowest cost, just to
Hmm.
check that they could, that you could frame it for $5 effectively, and probably a bit more now. But that's, we designed it so it was standard sizes. And really, if you bought this book for something like $20 and then you spent $5 on a frame, it might be 10 now. But for very little cost per painting, it would still look pretty good, actually. And then you could hang them on the wall in the icon corner. And so that was the plan. And in fact, it's been very successful. It's sold at this point, I think, sort of well over 20,000 copies, which is it's not a New York Times bestseller, but it's not bad for a book of its time.
Right. Yeah. When I saw the pictures at the back, I actually thought to myself, gee, I wonder if I take a razor, I get right near the spine, can I get those off and frame them? So,
well, there is a perforation there actually so you might need so they are actually perforated, so they tear out if you're careful.
Yes.
So
they are beautiful, and I recognize one of them from the book we talked about last night, the cover.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So that's like a real bonus in that book, for people.
Yes, I would say so. I think it's some of my best work, I would say, particularly that face of Christ, I think is a good one. It's something I was happy with anyway. The Mandilion, it's a Veronica cloth, effectively, a face on a cloth, a face of Christ. And it gives you a start. So people may decide after that they wish to switch out the reproductions for for original art, if they start to commission icons or something. But at least then you've got all the paintings there in the meantime. So it will help.
Yeah. That will, even if they've only got a table at that point and nothing else, having those behind the table on the wall, it's going to give them a lot of encouragement to keep going.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other thing is that of course, again, going into the homes of Eastern Rite Christians, that they would typically have an icon corner, and it's something that we could have in the Roman Rite. It's not unusual for traditional Catholic families to have some sort of home altar or an image somewhere, but this just in a way formalizes it and reestablishes the tradition. The other thing that I wanted to do was just refer to the core imagery of the icon corner, again, with the hope that this might work its way into parish churches. So the tradition in an icon corner is that you have three images at the core. And so you have three in a line or in a triangle, two, one right, one left, and one in the center, sort of perhaps raised up a little bit. But on the left, you would have a Madonna and Child, the Theotokos, or the Mother of God, showing us her son. So typically a child. And so what that represents is the life, if you like, of Christ. So he received his humanity from his mother. And then in the center and prominently placed, you would have a crucifixion, Christ on the cross, and that represents the passion and the death of Christ. And then on the right, you'd have an image that represents the risen Christ in glory. So it could be a transfiguration or one of these paintings like a Mandilion, which is a face on the cross. It's Christ in glory, or Christ in majesty, sitting on a throne, surrounded by cherubim and seraphim. That's another possible resurrected Christ. Or a famous icon of the Pantocrator, where he has his hand raised and his blessing. But that represents the resurrection. So in those three images, you have the life, the passion and death, and the resurrection of Christ, which is, you might say, salvation history in a nutshell. Everything anticipates that and emanates from it. If you and the way that it was explained to me, I'm interested to know your views on this. Is that in a way, all of our personal stories in some way participate in that grand story. It refers to the church as a whole. It refers to the people of God. It's the story of Christ, but it's also our story. In some way, we're living that drama in microcosm, and also in the sort of arc of our lives. And the other point is that the Psalms, which are the core of the Liturgy of the Hours, are very personal accounts, which collectively, in all 150, as Thomas Aquinas said, he said it's the most important book in the Bible, I think, because it's at the heart of the Bible, and it's an account of everything that preceded the Psalms, and they anticipate everything that was to come in some way. But it's all done through personal accounts, and we engage with the voice of the person who wrote the song, through the emotions that are expressed, and that draws us in and takes us into usually some aspect of that drama of salvation history that is lived out and through the liturgy. And of course, the consummation of this is the Eucharist, and we put on Christ and partake of the divine nature. We are united to the risen Christ, even in this life by degrees. And so the idea is to connect us to that story so that we see ourselves as participating in it through the vision, through the words of the Psalms, hopefully chanted. It's even possible to have a little lamp burning and some fragrance as well, so that all the senses are engaged.
Yeah, I was very impressed with that. You know, that you when you talk about all senses, I mean, and then you sort of said, "Be careful of the fire if you light the candle." I started to laugh. I said, "Good idea." But yeah, I really like that, because, we don't, and often, I think, in the Roman Rite, we don't really engage all the senses. We sing and listen, we look at what's going on in the altar. But it's not really, I mean, it's beautiful, but it doesn't engage everything. And sometimes the singing is really terrible.
Well, there's I mean, always you're trying to strike a balance, but with the singing in church. So at one level, you don't want it to be so beautiful and precious that the congregation just sits back and listens. At the same time, you want some participation, but not in a way that destroys the whole thing. And so, again, there are ways of doing with that. I think it's encouraging congregational participation at set patterns, and in ways that have the choir leading the congregation, both men and women singing. If it's female cantors, actually, are very difficult. It's very difficult for men to join in with the female voice. That's why, another reason why I encourage the dads to start singing, because this was explained to me that the female voice is pure. It's angelic to listen to, but it's pure and it's high, and the male has to be able to. The male voice, the man has to be able to listen to that and then come in an octave lower. Now, it's not very difficult, but not everyone has the skill to be able to do that instantly, and it's enough to give many hesitation. Apparently, the male voice, if you have a male cantor, there are harmonics within the voice. In other words, it's richer. So the female voice in its perfection is pure, the male voice in its perfection is rich, and there are harmonics within it that include the high notes.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's always easier for women to join in with a man that,
Mm-hmm.
and of course men can join in with the male voice because it's
Yeah.
pitched at them, than it is for men to join in with women. And uh, someone once explained to me, it was someone from John Cantius actually. He said that they always try and have male cantors as far as possible because
Mm-hmm.
and the way he put it, he says the women will sing anyway, but the men just will not follow a woman. And it's not that they begrudge what's going on. It's just actually difficult for
Yeah.
people who are expert singers to do it, and so they tend not to bother.
Mm-hmm.
So another reason to try and get men to get over their self-consciousness and sing, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, did you mention having music when I can't remember now. Did you mention having music when you're at the home altar praying?
Yes. So I have, yes, I chant particularly.
Yes.
Uh, and so immediately this sort of causes worry, and there's a certain skill to that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always possible to do this at the very least recto tono, in other words, just on one note.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had a little bit of a description there to help people get over the self-consciousness in
Mm-hmm.
doing that. And I say, get used to the sound of your own voice. Normally, what happens is that people aren't used to hearing themselves singing, and they suddenly feel nervous, to do it in front of other people. But if you're used to hearing yourself in
Mm-hmm.
isolation, then
Yeah.
usually you don't mind doing it in front of others. Anyway, that was my experience. So I encourage people just to sing in the shower or something
Yeah.
habitually and
Mm-hmm.
just get used to doing it. And all you have to do is you could just read any text. I've got the book here. I need to say Lord's Vespers, Compline, the names and times of each office, Saint Benedict's rule, which is the foundational document of. So I'm just reading a text there. But if you
Uh-huh.
can speak, you can do it on one note like that and just keep going, just
Yeah.
keep going, and get used to doing it authoritatively and powerfully, and then you can lead a whole office. You could pick up the Magnificat
Mm-hmm.
magazine, for example, and sing that. Now, in addition, I have since developed psalm tones. I've adapted the Gregorian tones to English. I'm actually involved with somebody at the moment trying to produce a book which will help families to sing the psalms in the home. So it's a complement, effectively, complement LEMENT to the Little Oratory. That actually will give some musical instruction, but
Good.
it's introducing basic traditional forms and chant. And again, the thought is that we could encourage people to do this, particularly to get men unafraid to sing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it will spread. And again, if it's going on in the families, invite other families, have it in your neighborhood, and then it might work its way into the parish. If a congregation really just wants to sing and chant, even in simple forms, there will be priests who are happy to give them the leeway to do so. If they know that there are people who want to do this and they've got ideas on how to do this very simply, but well.
Mm-hmm. Good. Mm-hmm. So, apart from the music, when I was looking at or reading through all of the things that you could do with this altar, from, the kind of fabric you have on it, the pictures you'd have, a crucifix. I mean, it's really so complete. You can picture, and of course, as a woman who was a housewife, I can can really picture doing that. It's so it gives us the ideas of what you want to have there, and then you can select the right ones. So it's really. I'd never even thought of having something like that in the house.
Well, it's dropped out of the tradition, shall we say,
Mm-hmm.
in the West, in the Roman Road. The other thing that I was interested in is that typically, if you offer advice like this, the ones who want to take it up first, shall we say, will be the pious. And I mean pious in the good sense of the word. It's not.
Yeah.
I know it can be used as sort of sneering,
Oh,
derogatory term. I don't mean that at all. It's good to be pious
yes,
and
it
to be
is.
observant and want to do what's right.
Mm-hmm.
But the very often those people, they already have devotions and they have a spiritual life and they've got a director. So the question then is how do you develop, where does the liturgy of the hours particularly fit into the spiritual life? Because my guess is that for many this will not be something they do regularly. They will probably pray the rosary. They'll have other personal prayers, and then they'll go to Mass and might even go to daily Mass.
Mm-hmm.
So the point about this is that there is a balance of Mass, the liturgy of the hours, devotions, and personal prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is something that Benedict XVI talks about. I've read articles. Now, if you're going to introduce the liturgy of the hours, most
Mm-hmm.
people are going to have to drop something else that they do.
Mm-hmm.
Very few can just go on adding and adding. For those who are new, you talked when we had our conversation about the vision for you, for converts, that you're just beginning in this journey. The liturgy of the hours might be something you can take on because you
Mm-hmm.
can do it each morning or some mornings and some nights or something like that as a start. But there is, it depends on the person. It's always something you should talk about with a spiritual director. But there is an argument to say that the highlight of our worship should be Sunday worship. It should be the Sunday.
Yes.
And the other things should ultimately be in service of that. And
Mm-hmm.
for some, that can mean not daily Mass and Rosary and Sunday Mass, but actually maybe the Liturgy of the Hours
Mm-hmm.
and Sunday Mass. And then other devotions and personal prayer. So
Mm-hmm.
I, for example, tend not to go to daily Mass. I will from time to time. My
Mm-hmm.
wife is more inclined to daily Mass, and so occasionally I'll go with her. Sometimes she goes on her own. But I am devoted to the Liturgy now, so I will do offices every day.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I go to Sunday worship.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel liturgically fulfilled in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not everyone is going to be like that, but it's it's worth remembering that the liturgy of the hours is, according to the general instruction and also tradition, a preparation for Mass, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's something that can lead us into the highlight, which should be the Sunday
Mm-hmm.
worship.
Mm-hmm.
And I was told that whatever you do, have a balance of these things that seems like the consummation of everything is the Sunday worship, and of course the days of obligation, which are like Sundays during the week, if you like. But they should be high points.
Mm-hmm.
And now the other thing is that with the liturgy of the hours, one of the reasons I like it particularly is that I find that more than daily Mass, very often, it communicates to me the changes in the seasons uh, and the feasts and the memorias, if you like, of the
Mm-hmm.
church year, because there are antiphons and hymns that are proper to them, and they tend to be more extended in the liturgy of the hours than in the Mass. It's not that the Mass is does not reflect it at all. You'll be aware of the feast day, but it might just be a collect or something like that. Whereas with the Liturgy of the Hours, there's more, you dwell longer. You have the luxury of being able to dwell on that a little longer. And so I find that I become more aware of the changes in the liturgical year and the feast. That's one reason why I like it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The word that you used of you feel it's more fulfilling, and I think you just said it fulfills you more, and I can see that because sometimes I usually go to daily mass, but I can't always get there, and I always think to myself I should be doing something else, but I never am exactly sure what it is that I want to introduce. I'll say, I'll pray the rosary, something like that. And, but it's like, I feel like there's more that can be done.
Yeah.
And it takes time to find those things. And, I was reading about the Liturgy of the Hours today in your book, and it was like, wow, this is pretty interesting.
This is one of the great gifts of the Second Vatican Council, by the way, is the encouragement for people to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I would say that in recent years, the form of the office that's offered by the Anglican ordinariates, which is based on the Book of Common Prayer, fully recognized by the Church, by the Roman Church, it divides the psalm cycle, all 150 psalms, up into a 30-day cycle, and morning and evening prayer. And this actually is continuing a sort of form that developed in England prior to the Reformation and the Sarum liturgies. Broadly speaking, I don't want to overstress that point, but it comes out of that. It's in some ways it's a continuation of Catholic traditions in England, particularly. But that psalm cycle is very good because it means that with morning and evening prayer from the ordinariate, you can cover all 150 psalms in the course of a month, and there's a sense of completion actually. And it's not too onerous. Otherwise, if you do, for example, the rule of Saint Benedict, that's on a weekly cycle, 8 offices a day, and most people simply can't manage that.
No,
Benedictine monks very often don't even manage that. They have abbreviated forms, so you're in office in the church for 10 hours a day or something if you're doing so. So what happens is people will do reduced versions or things like the Little Office of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which is great, but it means you're doing the same few psalms every single day. And you're missing out the full Psalter, whereas the office from the Book of Common Prayer works beautifully. I think it's just perfectly suited for lay people. And those who get very keen have the option of inserting psalms for the day or even compline. You can do more if you want, but you know that you're covering all the psalms through morning and evening prayer in this cycle. And just to encourage people, there's an app or a website that I discovered a year and a bit ago when I was visiting Oxford, and it's called singtheoffice.com. Singtheoffice.com. Okay, and that has the morning and evening prayer from the Anglican ordinariate in England. So this is the Catholic version, but everything is set to plain chant, and furthermore, you can press a button, and it actually gives you the notes. You can hear it and maybe even begin to learn. But it gives you all the propers and the ordinaries and the psalms, and it's a great asset, I think, for those who want to just give it a try. And you could, if you see someone using their phone, they might actually be doing something good. It's not always damaging
Yeah,
social media and Facebook and all that sort of stuff.
yeah,
So,
that's yeah, yeah.
so yeah,
So I'm going to look that up. Singtheoffice.com.
yeah,
Now,
give it a go.
next time I talk, I may start chanting. No, but
Well, nobody's listening. You do it at home. You can
yeah,
just give it a try. Do it on
yeah.
recto tono. Yeah.
It sounds good. hmm So this is another good book. I'll tell you. You produce them. Well, you really do. And there's a lot of information in here, as I said, that I wasn't aware of. I
So
don't know.
what was new to you then, Cynthia? Tell me what jumped out at you. Can you remember?
Yeah, the importance of time. The time of the time of the season and how the liturgy changes. Because
Ah,
yeah, and the idea of singing. Uh, the Psalms. And I mean, I knew that these things existed, but I didn't know much about them. And that's why I said, you literally could use this as a textbook, but it's not written like a textbook. It's written like you're talking to us. Which is great. So some of those things I'm just looking on page 171, how to sing the Psalms. It's just very interesting to see all of these other things you can do that you don't think of. And I mean, bringing the idea of having a table and having it all decorated with the colors of the the liturgical year, and the pictures. It's very new to me. But even though I've been Catholic for quite a while now, it's
wow.
like I haven't been exposed to this. And if I haven't, I do a lot of reading. I bet a lot of people haven't been.
Yeah. Well, that is very interesting that you haven't. It was interesting. I visited recently. I won't say where,
Mm-hmm,
but someone who has just been recruited, friend of
mm-hmm,
mine, to teach seminarians to chant.
mm-hmm,
And this is a great move by the seminary. It's a fantastic thing that they've
mm-hmm,
invested not only in this, but in her. She's a great teacher. But
mm-hmm.
the thing that she said to me, which I found interesting, was that the seminarians are reluctant to believe that they really need to chant.
Yeah.
They think this is something that's a ministry that helps sort of dress up the words, and it's for the lay people or it's for others, and that they don't really need to do it. And she said that the reason is because they don't understand, many of them, and they're just seminarians, so they're
Mm-hmm.
learning a lot, for the first
Yeah.
time. But they don't. They're unaware that the chanting actually aids them in praying the mass. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
about communicating this to other people. It's actually
Right.
helping them to enter into the mystery of the sacramental life more deeply as well, and
Mm-hmm.
that's important.
Yeah.
And of course, that what's true for them is true for us.
Mm-hmm.
This is not just about evangelizing others who walk into the church through the
Mm-hmm.
beauty of it. It's actually deepening our prayer. And when you
Right.
understand it like that, that's where you start to think, well, we need tradition here, because it isn't just about how I feel or whether I like the music. There are forms. It's as with sacred art. There
Mm-hmm.
are forms which have been developed over centuries, over generations, and the church, in her wisdom, shall we say, has observed the effect that it has on those who pray with these forms. So it's the actual structure of the melodies
Mm-hmm.
has been developed to work on our hearts, if you like, in particular ways that work in harmony with the words.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not something that necessarily we're going to find that we like at a sort of immediate emotional level. I hope it does, and it can do. And as we
Mm-hmm.
become familiar with it, it very often does happen like that. But the measure of this is not really how we feel during the process. It's the effect it has on us as a result of doing it. And that is seen in the fruits that it bears, which are the life we lead outside the church. When we're dismissed, iter missa est. What happens then?
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
that's where we observe whether this has had a good effect or a bad effect. Is it actually aiding us to achieve those ideals of lives of virtue, of love of neighbor and love of God out in the world? And then we know that we've had an authentic encounter in the liturgy. So in other words, it's helped us to love God, to accept God's love and offer it back to him, which is the dynamic that occurs in the liturgy itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a good explanation, which, I think, is important for people to know. It is, it's, I often think that people think of the liturgy as just going to mass and doing a duty. It's like they don't, I have known many Catholics. It's like I have to do my mass duty, and it's like it's a punishment.
Yeah.
It's like if you don't go, you're going to get punished even worse. So it's like to see that beauty and to start to incorporate it into your whole spirituality. I think this is really something interesting.
Yes, and this I can't remember. I might have mentioned this yesterday a little bit, but actually I've been just talking to a friend of mine who's a priest in England. I mean, actually, I knew him long before he became a priest. He's recently ordained, and we're talking about organising a conference. He's the main thrust of the organisation, but we're talking together about it, that would take place in London next year. And we're both very interested in liturgy, and we were thinking, well, do we do another conference on what's wrong with the implementation of Vatican II? How do we improve the Mass? What's the ideal? Are we doing reform of the reform, or is the 1962 or is it the 1955 missal the perfect version? So that's all good discussion. Those things do need to be addressed. I'm not against that. But actually, now it's something that many people are discussing. But actually, for all that we set out the ideals, there's very little that we can do about that at this point. We have to pray and hope that the Church, in her wisdom, gives us something that's going to help us more, should we say, than what we have now. But what doesn't help me is being embittered about what's wrong. I know that for certain. So we thought, well, okay, let's imagine hypothetically that we have a situation where Mass on Sunday is absolutely the worst. I think I did say this yesterday, but the worst you could imagine. It's licit, but beyond that, there's every abuse going on. There's clowns dancing liturgically around the altar, or whatever you care to mention. Okay, let's imagine that's your Sunday experience, and you can't avoid it because that's your local church. It's the only one you can get to. We're obliged to go. Okay, we might have to hold our nose a bit, but that gift that the church gives us of deification, of union with God, is available to us through that Mass.
Yes.
So how can we see the good in that so that we can receive that gift? And
Mm-hmm.
how can we help others to do that? So the answer lies in this preparation for the Mass. And so much of this is a focus on the domestic church. And I was talking about the aspect of sort of personal preparation yesterday and the spiritual life that really that's a process of personal spirituality is what the
Yes.
Vision for You offers us.
Mm-hmm.
Not the only one, but it's something for those who
Mm-hmm.
don't have that might be useful, as you were saying
Yep.
when we were discussing it yesterday. But what this does is give us another aspect of that preparation for Mass, which is family prayer. If you're not in a family, I was single. I'm married now. I was single for a long, long time. So I used to feel that I don't mind focus on the family. What about me? I'm single. Should we say in the home? Even if you have a shared house with other people, we can pray in the home, or even if I'm on my own, which I was for many, many years. None of this is denied us. We can pray liturgically, morning prayer, even remotely. But I can
Mm-hmm.
sing it, I can do it in a dignified way, then drive to church and participate and do
Mm-hmm.
my best.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that that through that process of having a personal spirituality that works in harmony with the liturgy of the hours, which is, if you like, my exercise of the priesthood of the laity, if that's the right phrase, then actually it prepares me for Mass. And if
Mm-hmm.
all I can do is just hold my nose and just at some levels, aesthetically at least, grin and
Mm-hmm.
bear it,
Mm-hmm.
I can still, that gift of deification is open to me. I'm not going to pronounce that I'm deified, but what I will say is that I have a joyful and
Mm-hmm.
good life. And I know that the church really is what's giving me that gift, because before I found a faith, I was miserable in my
Yeah.
20s. So I
Yeah.
know that that's part of it.
Mm-hmm. A big part of it, probably.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I can't imagine. I mean, I compare myself before converting and now. I mean, as far as inner joy, and the inner joy after becoming Catholic is like just multiples of what I had before.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a happy person, but there was not really that joy. And, when I go to Mass, it's like I feel like I can get more air in my lungs. I know that probably sounds weird, but it's like I just feel more alive.
Yeah. And
It's,
it's a strange thing for me. It's not that I necessarily enjoy Mass. Sometimes I don't, actually.
yeah, uh,
I'll be honest, I don't. And it's not just because aesthetically I don't. Sometimes, I do get bored. All those things happen
yeah,
but I know that as a result of going and persevering, the
hmm,
life I have in general is better for having done it.
yeah,
It's sometimes I have to take that spoonful of pink medicine, if you know what I mean.
yeah,
Now, I'm I'm not saying that's what the Eucharist is. What I'm
no, of
saying
course,
is that in its appearance to me, in my sinful nature,
hmm,
sometimes that's what it feels like. I know
yeah,
it isn't that, but the
yeah,
point about it is I persevere and I grow through doing it, and I've never felt that I shouldn't be doing it, or even when I don't want to do it, I know that I want, at a deeper
yeah,
level, I do
yeah,
desire to do
hmm,
that because of the life that it gives me in general at a
hmm,
deeper, more permanent level, I would say.
yeah. I try to make every day, but of course, I live in Vermont, and I hate driving in snow, and I live on a hill. So I don't always make it. I just
Yeah.
take one look outside and I think, well, okay, should I go to Mass or should I risk killing somebody? Like, so I stay home. But
Well, and the morning prayer and evening prayer from the
yes, yeah,
ordinary is for you, I would say. That's your
agree.
Snow weather prayer.
Yeah, really, really.
Yeah.
It is unbelievable up here. When we get snow, it's like, you feel like you're at the North Pole.
You're
It's
in Vermont. I was in New Hampshire, the next door state, for a
mm-hmm,
while. And
mm-hmm,
I first came to the US in my mid 20s. That's what gave me the desire to come and live here permanently. Excuse
mm-hmm,
me, permanently.
mm-hmm.
But that was in Upper Michigan, which
Uh,
is the UP, as it's called, which is um, way up. I mean, it's on the southern shore of Lake Superior, a place
mhm.
called Michigan Tech. And the first winter I was there, we had 320 inches of snow.
Yeah.
And apparently only Buffalo, New York has more or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
I know what it's like to be snowed in. But in
Oh,
those
yeah.
days, I was not a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So, in fact, it was just before I was sliding into the despair that ultimately led me to the church. Although I loved my exposure to the US, I will say so. That's what
Mm-hmm.
made me want to come and live here. I love the people I met,
Mm-hmm.
and what I now see as what I was experiencing was the embodiment actually of a Christian culture
Yeah.
that remained in those places. People, who I'm not saying they're all sort of exemplary saints, but the
Yeah.
culture generally was warm and welcoming, and I
Mm-hmm.
noticed it actually. I was treated far better than I deserved, I felt.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah. It's similar here in Vermont. You know, you see the same people all the time. They're friendly. We have coffee hour after mass.
mm,
You actually get into a community of people that are that think like you do. And that is really so. It's comfortable. So it's I don't know. We probably have 50, 60 people that will go to the coffee hour. And I've been given the ministry of cake making. Yeah,
Ministry of Cake.
for
Okay. That
yeah,
sounds like a government department, actually. The minister in Britain, every government department is the Ministry of this, that, and the
yeah,
other.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So I have for Pentecost I have to make 12 red velvet cakes with chocolate frosting, and then they want white frosting drizzled over that's been dyed red. And
wow, that's very okay. That's
12
good.
cakes.
Okay,
Anyway,
that definitely sounds like the sort of project that Lila would be advocating. Actually,
yeah, yeah. So
um,
yeah.
I just want before we finish. I noticed the hour is up. There's one thing I wanted to mention that's really developed since I wrote this book, or Lila and I wrote this book, um, and that is the idea of actually um, inviting people into our homes. So my wife and I have started to have social evenings, just very
Hmm.
sort of low key things, but we
Hmm.
invite people around. We sing evening prayer together. So people come and we just invite them to join in with us, and some will, some
Hmm.
won't. But we gather around the icon corner and we do it, and then we have the meal, and then we have the social. And
Hmm.
what I found is, first of all, that it changes the mood of the evening if you pray together in
Hmm.
that. Secondly, I will lead the Psalms, and I'll show people what to do. But I found that it's something. The Psalms is something that people will join in, especially non-Catholics, because they know
Hmm.
it's scriptural. If they're Protestant, for example, and if you're using the Ordinariate office, the Book of Common Prayer, a lot of them, they will use that something similar in their own churches. So,
Hmm.
strangely, the Liturgy of the Hours seems to be a way of bringing Christians of different denominations together, but in a way that's not the sort of the sort of ecumenism that is lowest common denominator. This isn't finding something that we can all just about put up with. It's actually finding something that lifts us up together to something higher.
Good.
And of course, if you're praying the Psalms on a Thursday evening or something, you don't have to get into debates about transubstantiation or anything like that. You go your own ways on Sunday. But my belief is that what we're doing is we're drawing people into the church, whether they know it or not. I was told that one of the reasons that the Anglican ordinariate was created was that they noticed that their liturgies were converting people to Catholicism. And so the church noticed this, and so Benedict, of course, was instrumental in this. Yet, another thing he did. And so the point about this was that they looked at the form of it, and especially the liturgy of the hours for the baptized is authentically liturgical. And so it is liturgical not because the church says so. The church says so because it's liturgical. It's an intrinsic property of the form of worship and the outer structures of it that the church recognized. And so I think that means that if we use something like that, it will be attracting people, despite themselves, to what they really yearn for, even if they don't know it, which is Christ present in the Eucharist. So it's stimulating that part of them. But people enjoy it. They're happy to participate. And it's a great way of bringing Christians together. And especially in America at the moment, I think that's something that we need, actually, especially when the faith of all denominations, is being attacked so much.
Yeah.
So just a thought to finish with there.
Okay. Well, this was very enjoyable. So we meet again on Monday.
We do. I'm sure it's in the calendar, so I look forward to that. Yeah.
And which book would we be doing that day?
Well, probably The Way of Beauty. So I'll just this one.
Yep.
And I sent you the details for the Veiling to Reveal book. So hopefully you can do that before the final talk of the four of them.
Yeah. Okay. Would you like to listen to prayer?
Okay. O God, be in our thoughts and words and deeds. Send your Holy Spirit to guide us that we may complete your will, grace responding to grace. May the beauty of our work inspire those who see it to love as Christ loved, that through worship of you and charity to others, all may know his peace and joy. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.
Amen.
All right. God bless you, Cynthia. Good to talk to you.
Take care. Yep, same here. Bye-bye.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.